tiny nerve cells called neurons. These neurons have tiny branches that reach out and connect to other neurons to form a neural net. Each place where they connect is integrated into a thought or a memory. Now, the brain builds up all its concepts by the law of associative memory. For example, ideas, thoughts, and feelings are all constructed and interconnected in this neural net, and all have a possible relationship with one another. The concept and the feeling of love, for instance, is stored in this vast neural net. But we build the concept of love from many other different ideas. Some people have love connected to disappointment. When they think about love, they experience the memory of pain, sorrow, anger, and even rage. Rage may be linked to hurt, which may be linked to a specific person, which then is connected back to love. There's a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is like a little mini factory, and it is a place that assembles certain chemicals that match certain emotions that we experience. Those particular chemicals are called peptides. They're small chain amino acid sequences. The body's basically a carbon unit that makes about 20 different amino acids all together to formulate its physical structure. In the hypothalamus, we take small chain proteins called peptides, and we assemble them into certain neuropeptides or neurohormones that match the emotional states that we experience on a daily basis. So there's chemicals for anger, and there's chemicals for sadness, and there's chemicals for victimization. There's chemicals for lust. There's a chemical that matches every emotional state that we experience. And the moment that we experience that emotional state in our body or in our brain, that hypothalamus will immediately assemble the peptide that then releases it through the pituitary into the bloodstream. The moment it makes it into the bloodstream, it finds its way to different centers or different parts of the body. Now, every single cell in the body has these receptors on the outside.
And one cell can have thousands of receptors studying its surface, kind of opening up to the outside world. And when a peptide docks on a cell, it literally, like a key going into a lock, sits on the receptor surface and attaches to it and kind of moves the receptor, and kind of like a doorbell buzzing, sends a signal into the cell.
Our experiences color what we know. So there is no completely objective appraisal of anything, because our appraisal of everything has to do with our previous experiences and our emotions. Everything has an emotional weighting to it.
We've gone from emotions being these spiritual, immaterial things to things, they're not even things, to actual molecules with molecular weights and peptides with sequences and structures.
Science knows now that the hypothalamus makes neuropeptides, and those neuropeptides are strong chemicals. They have taken laboratory animals and they've hooked up electrodes in certain parts of their brain that produce those neuropeptides. And those neuropeptides are such strong chemicals that, given the fact that they train the laboratory animal to press a lever to get that chemical release, that neuropeptide release, it would choose the neuropeptide release more than hunger, more than sex, more than thirst, more than sleep. As a matter of fact, it went to the point of physical exhaustion and collapsed before it would take care of itself physically. And that's really what stress does to our body. We become so addicted to the stress in our lives that we can't quit our job, even though it doesn't serve us. We can't leave our relationship because it doesn't serve us. We can't make choices because the stimulus and the responses produce the chemistry that clouds our choices, and we're no different than the dog who lacks its ability to make choices because of its smaller frontal lobe. But it all starts in the cell. And who gives the cells the order? The orders come from the neural net in our brain, which are based on the experiences and information that we've logged in there. And we use a certain box of solutions to our life that causes chemistry to take place. So in order for us to change the chemistry, we would literally have to change the neural net, which means we'd have to change our identity, which means we'd have to change our attitude, or change the way in which we interact with our environment. And every time we keep being the same person and keep experiencing the same attitudes, all we're doing is reinforcing ourselves as our identity. Now, all aging is a result of improper protein production. What happens when we age? Our skin loses elasticity. Well, elastin is a protein. What happens to our enzymes? We don't digest as well. What happens to our synovial fluid? Those are proteins. They become brittle and stiff. What happens to our bones? They become thin. So all aging is a result of improper protein production. So then the question arises, does it really matter what we eat? And does nutrition really have an effect if the cell doesn't even have the receptor sites after 20 years of emotional abuse to even receive or let in the nutrients that are necessary for its health? The brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers, because the same specific neural nets are then firing. We know physiologically that nerve cells that fire together wire together. If you practice something over and over again, those nerve cells have a long-term relationship. If you get angry on a daily basis, if you get frustrated on a daily basis, if you suffer on a daily basis, if you give reasons for the victimization in your life, you're rewiring and reintegrating that neural net on a daily basis, and that neural net now has a long-term relationship with all those other nerve cells called an identity. We also know that nerve cells that don't fire together no longer wire together. They lose their long-term relationship because every time we interrupt the thought process that produces a chemical response in the body, every time we interrupt it, those nerve cells that are connected to each other start breaking the long-term relationship. If we practice our mental rehearsal and our skill in being able to do it, will show that certain brain circuits will grow as a result of our effort. It'll get easier to do, in other words.
There is enormous potential to change the kind of behaviors and characteristic patterns that we've fallen into. In fact, if you've listened and have remembered anything that I've said, your physiology is different than it was before that. That is something that Eric Kandel, the recent winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Science, said very eloquently at a talk, that basically memory has been encoded, your genetic structure has changed, and while we previously would talk about the nervous system as this very rigid thing that didn't have much capacity for change, we now know that on many levels that isn't true. And actually there's a tremendous amount of plasticity, which basically means ability to change within the nervous system.
We are physically, chemically, emotional human beings. That's not a bad thing. It only becomes a limitation when we keep accessing those same emotions and those same attitudes on a daily basis and go nowhere in terms of our change or evolution in our life. So you can't ask them their opinion, because you know what they're going to tell you. You're starting to act different. I liked you better the other way. And that's a great sign that you're making a change.
I'm Dr. Daniel Monti. I'm a physician with specialty training in psychiatry and human behavior. I'm on the full-time faculty at the Jefferson Medical College.
A little about myself. Oh, the light is blinking already. See, this is what happens whenever I speak. Weird things happen. Okay. All right, well, look, when I hold it, it stays on. What does that mean? All right. Oh, that's okay. Maybe God wants me to meet you.
Don't make the mistake of thinking that the scientific community is scientific.
And extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Now, the problem is that people defending the conventional approach to consciousness, brain equals mind equals computer, behave as if they've got proof and we don't. and they got, okay, pardon my